Do I regret being me? I mean, yes, there are going to be challenges, but having a child is a wonderful thing.
This is uncomfortable for me to say because it was genuinely something that crossed my mind and I felt guilty about it.
The first thing that strikes me about what you've just said is your incredible honesty.
Gus, it's going to be a smart one.
I know.
This is going to be a good one.
I've really had to switch the brain on over the last couple of minutes,
this
Debra.
Is right up.
I can remember my father saying to me, Debra, it would be really good if society came to you. But chances are it's not going to.
But is that your unique body perspective for you? Is that your way of being identified?
Yes, I do stand out. What it means is that I have a significant less degree of privacy. Like, I wouldn't be able to do anything illegal too readily.
Yeah, that would be a pretty quick Crime Stoppers.
I'd get picked out in a lineup, wouldn't I?
She's 4'11".
My name is Debra Keenahan, and I have two bows, two strings to my bow. The first part of my life, my first PhD, was in psychology, and I studied the effect of dehumanisation. My second PhD is in visual arts, and in that PhD I studied critical disability aesthetics. Now, the reason for the choice of those two, which may seem quite disparate.
I was going to say that. They're two pretty random things put together, which I like.
No, they're very related. And they're very related because of my lived experience. Because I have achondroplasia, dwarfism. That is, well, in Australia, I would define that as a disability. It means I stand about the height of an average 9-year-old, despite the fact that I'm a mature woman. And the subject of my first PhD, dehumanisation, is where people are treated as less than or other than human. And it's the sort of dynamic that occurred with the Holocaust, but it occurs in any ill treatment of people who are seen as different. And the second PhD in visual arts on critical disability aesthetics is the visual, in many ways, the visual capture of that phenomenon, in the sense of I adhere to the critical social model of disability, looking at how we're all physically different, right? All of us are physically different, and we all have different degrees of limitations to our physicality, but depending on how we are reacted to or treated by society, that will influence the extent to which we could be considered disabled. And my visual arts was about capturing and immersing people into my lived experience of those negative responses all too often.
Gus, it's going to be a smart one.
I know.
This is going to be a good one.
I've really had to switch the brain on over the last couple of minutes,
this
Debra.
Is right up. We do all kinds of scope on this podcast, Debra, and I love getting in this kind of stuff because this is different to what we sometimes do, which is great. So I'm excited.
And it is, I had a look online about some of your art pieces and your exhibitions, and it is a lot of life through your perspective, not necessarily, a lot of it is height. So, I mean, there are moments to capture, life through your perspective in your eyes, but it is also the activations that you have are quite confronting a little bit as well, I would say, as somebody who is able-bodied as well, to see to kind of confront some ableism that maybe I have in regards to your disability.
Can you talk about some of those installations and arts for the people that haven't seen them?
Yes. Well, I'm a great believer. Part of the reason why I made this shift in my career is that for me, the arts have a great capacity of engaging an incredibly broad spectrum of people. And what I have found is that with the arts, because I'm a multidiscipline artist, so I use different mediums to engage people differently, to try and immerse them into my world. So I will use photography, where I captured instances of me walking down the street and the reactions I would get from people just simply walking down the street.
The perspective is quite interesting in those photos, because you'd walk past them, but the amount of faces of who would kind of let a friend next to them know, oh my God, I'd turn around, did you miss, Debra in the street?
Deborah,
Yes.
Angus gets that a lot as well because he's really good looking. That's what he reckons, that everyone rubbernegs him as well.
Well, yes, sometimes incredibly attractive.
Yeah, that's the main
I need
reason,
a
Deborah.
photographer following
Same
me
as
down
you,
the
to be
street.
honest, Deborah. It's just because you're attractive.
Oh.
It's not nothing.
Thank you, darling. Thank you.
Deborah, though,
Yeah.
we will talk more about the art, but for us, it's not a structure of our podcast, but we do like to kind of go back to the start of your disability journey, which for you is birth. Being one of 5 children and the youngest, can you talk about your family dynamic, about being, I'm not sure about disability in your family, but, certainly being born with dwarfism. Can you talk about that dynamic, especially, and I'm not going to age you, but in an era that maybe wasn't as accepting as we're potentially more becoming?
Yes, you can age me, Angus. I don't mind. I'm proud of my age.
Good. Well, how about you're 60 as we currently sit? Is that right?
60,
Okay,
yes.
beautiful.
Yes, I'm 60. So I was born in 1962. Now, the dynamics, the family dynamics, which interestingly I do present in my most recent theatre work, Othering. I was a change of life baby, right? So I'm the youngest of 5. And so my parents were in their 40s when they had me. My eldest brother was 20 years older than me. And the youngest of the 4 boys was 11 years older. Now, my situation being, all of my family are average height, right? And that is the case for 80% of people born with my condition, which is achondroplasia dwarfism, which is the most common form of dwarfism. And 80% of us are born to average height people with no record of the condition.
So they're carrying the gene, your parents?
No. That's the whole thing, because it's here we go. The gene is the FGFR3 gene.
Love that gene. It's one of my favourite genes.
Yes, one of the very many. Yes. Anyway, when that changes, it produces achondroplasia, but that dwarf gene is actually dominant.
Mm-hmm.
And so consequently, all people with achondroplasia carry what would be described as a normal gene. So consequently, 2 people with dwarfism can have average height children.
Really?
Yes, they can. They can have average height children.
As long as that gene's not dominant in the child, then they'll be average height. Is that right?
Well, no. As you see, because the person with dwarfism carries a normal gene. And
the 2 normal genes can connect.
Gene.
Yep, I got you.
The only issue, if you want to call it an issue, is when 2 people with dwarfism have a child. If the child is born with a double dwarf gene, they don't survive.
Okay. So there's a risk factor there. Yeah.
Yes, they don't survive. So consequently, everybody with dwarfism has a normal gene.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, yeah.
What about, if 2 people with dwarfism and have a child, which is the normal gene, which means they're not having a dwarfism.
If they can have,
how's it carrying the child go? Is the baby the same size?
Oh,
Does that make
that's a
sense?
great question. Yeah. Wow.
But no matter if you've got dwarfism or not, you're the same size as a baby, and then it's the growth that changes. Is that right?
Well,
Would it have to be like a C-section a little bit premature because of just the size of the child
Well, babies
in utero?
with dwarfism, for example, I have a child and my child has dwarfism. There was a 50% chance of that happening because my daughter's father is average height, you see. And yeah, we can carry to term, we may not. We may carry. It really depends on the individual.
Does a woman with dwarfism have a harder pregnancy because of your stature and size?
I certainly didn't.
Okay, great.
It's very much an individual thing. However, we can't. We have to have a cesarean birth. Yeah, we do. We have to have a cesarean birth.
What about doctors' reactions? Was there a doctor who said, it would be my suggestion to terminate or?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
That is shit house.
Yeah. Now, medical professionals, they vary. They vary, and you get some who are understanding and encourage, and they see the humanity and they engage with the person. And then there are those who come in with their own biases and attitudes, and we face those in all spectrums of life.
Yeah, I think that when I started doing a bit of work as speaking and consulting and that just blew my mind how many medical students I talked to that had absolutely no disability education during their course. Right?
Yes.
And then they're clinically trained, so they act clinically. So someone like myself's born or like yourself's born, Debra, and they basically give the cold, get ready for a tough life chat to the parents. And it's like, if you start from that place, it's hard to change to a place of pride.
For example, when I was born, right, I was diagnosed at 3 days old, right? And Mum, would tell the story that how she was told is this doctor just walked in. I was actually in the hospital room with her, having it, and just simply announced there's a problem with the baby. She has achondroplasia, dwarfism, and just walked out.
Yeah, see you later, have a good time. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it was always constructed as a problem, as an issue, and as I say in the play, it wasn't until I was 2 that Mum and Dad heard anything positive about me.
Yeah, and we're not painting all doctors with the same brush, obviously, but
absolutely
just
not.
a segment of it.
Yeah.
And I agree, it still happens to me, like as an adult, where they're like, well, I don't even know what to do here. It's like, hang on, what do you mean? So yeah, it's an ongoing problem where I think there needs to be more, like, not only just mainstream representation, which you do a great job of, Debra, to influence society as a whole, but actual direct education training as well. And the role that words and language and understanding can play, especially in a time of need when you might be learning something for the new, because there's no manual on how to have a disabled child, is there?
I mean, the thing is, when I was pregnant, I knew that there was a 50% chance my child could have dwarfism. Or that they could be average height. And it was very, very important for me to find out as much as I could about the child, not because of any, but the sad fact of my situation was that my mother was dying of cancer when I found out I was pregnant. So I wanted to find out as much about the child as I could so that I could tell Mum, and unfortunately Mum passed away 3 weeks before I had my daughter, but I was able to say that it was a girl. I was able to give her the name. I was able to name her after my mum. I was able to tell Mum that she was going to have dwarfism like me. So I was able to paint the picture.
Always the artist.
Yeah. Yes. But the thing is, it was constructing it positively. I mean, yes, there are going to be challenges, but having a child is a wonderful thing. It really is a joy. And although there may be difficulties when it comes to disability, they can be overcome. But don't let those difficulties then dominate to the point where there's a disengagement with all the joyous.
This is a conversation that we have had before on the podcast, but it's always lovely to have different perspectives on it, because it is something that somebody maybe listening to this right now might be thinking, which is how much thought you put into before becoming a mother, knowing the 50% chance of having a child with dwarfism. And for a lot of people, they would see that as giving a child not the right, leg up that it would have in life as an able-bodied child, to put a statistical risk for the child to be born with the same disability.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, reflecting on it, how I consider that is I would look at, well, do I regret being me? No.
Great way to say it.
No. Do I regret being me? No. Do I want and wish things to be different in society? Yes.
Yeah,
that's a nice way to put it.
It's a good way to put it.
I also want to say, there's one of the moments that I always think about, really powerful moment was episode 9. We have Steph Agnew, who's a great friend of both of ours. She was born, she had a degenerative eye condition that now has her completely blind. And then she was talking about her dream of becoming a mother one day. And we asked essentially the same question. And I remember it still sits with me. She's like, I live a beautiful life. I consider my life to be full. I consider it to be fantastic. I don't see my life being different to you in experience. Yes, there are, certainly different navigations. But she's like, I don't see my life as being, because she's, if she and when she hopefully has a family, she's going to be having the same statistical chance that it's passed down to her children. And she's like, well, why would I not want my child to potentially have a life that I still see as beautiful and worthy? Yes. I think was the word. So
yes,
it is a question. Yeah.
And the other thing too is, Angus, is that I have had the experience of being in different countries and being responded to differently. Like, for example, in Italy, I can walk down the street in peace. In Canada, I can walk down the street in peace. Yeah.
Well, we've spoken with Judeland Anthony, and he was speaking about his, I think he's Pakistan. But he was saying that,
Sri Lankan, I think.
Sri Lankan, yes, apologies. He was saying that disability over there is hidden. Like, if you have a disability, you are, hidden in a room. So, you're not shown to other families, or, it's just kind of seen as a sort of disgrace to the family to have disability.
Exactly. So it varies from culture to culture, from country to country. And I would also say that response can be different for different disabilities too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
for sure. So I grew up in the 90s. It was pretty crap sometimes to be disabled. Could imagine the 60s, right? Or maybe not. What was your experience when you were a young child with a disability where you grew up in this country?
And was there any representation?
No.
Mate, there's barely any now, let alone then. Yeah.
Well, that's part of my issue, Angus, that there remains very little representation, certainly of people with my condition, and certainly with women of my condition. I mean, everybody knows Peter Dinklage.
Yeah.
And he's done wonderful work. Brilliant work.
For people who might not know who Peter Dinklage is, famous for his role in Game of Thrones.
Yes. But when it comes to females and the representation of disabled women, That's another thing altogether.
Across all disabilities as well. I agree with you. Like there's a lot more male representation with disability than women. There shouldn't be. Yeah.
Yes, but going back to the question of growing up, I grew up in the 60s, and it was very much a case of my parents worked very, very hard. I can remember my father saying to me, Debra, it would be really good if society came to you. But chances are it's not going to. You're going to have to engage. You're going to have to put yourself forward. And in some situations, you're going to have to kind of fight. And that was the 60s. And he was right. He was right, and he remains right in many ways. Yes, it is getting better. And very much for people like yourselves, and this show is helping. Absolutely, it's and when you think back in the 60s, there wouldn't have been a show like this.
No podcast back then.
That would have been impressive if there was a podcast back then. I would have been very impressed.
Dylan, I mean, to last year, as Citizen of the Year, straight.
Just wouldn't have happened 5 years ago.
Congratulations. Belated congratulations from me.
Thanks, Debra. It wouldn't happen 5 years ago, let alone back then, And the reason I can do what I'm doing is because of people like you, for people that actually set the scene and broke that glass ceiling. So I can be like who I am, and I just want the next generation to say the same thing, It's definitely been everyone.
Well, and people sometimes say when, getting a little personal and critical, it's all about you, you're doing it, et cetera. You go, no, I'm doing this for my daughter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To make her life easier.
And I'm also doing it for your daughter, Like we're all doing it for each other, I think, and that's important.
Yeah.
And you do get people saying that, but, they can say what they want, really. Yeah.
Can I ask a cheeky question, Debra?
Yeah.
You did.
You're the host, mate. Do what you want.
Only one.
Yeah. Othering was we've spoken about a little bit. That was one of your performances you did at the Sydney Festival. You kind of you use disassembled voices of whispering and yelling to trigger elements of danger, demonstrating your perspective. And there is also that kind of photography that we spoke about of you walking down Sydney streets and sort of the people turning back or the reactions of real life examples of people to your height. Is there just a chance someone's a fan of Debra? And you're like, oh my God, they're staring at me because of, I have dwarfism rather than
doing the go back and do the
oh my God, that's Debra. I went past her artwork a couple of years ago. Do you know what I mean? Is there a little bit of you kind of go in with an expectation that people are looking at you because of your height, but really they might just be a fan?
There is that is always the case, Angus. But as Dylan, I'm sure will confirm this, there's a qualitative difference in the reactions. And most people have the capacity to read nonverbal behaviour. And it's what we capture in the photographs of the microaggressions. That's what the So there's a qualitative difference in when somebody looks at you and goes, I think I know that. Oh my gosh, that, versus,
Gotcha. Yeah, it's a tone change. I get that.
There's a qualitative difference and you pick it. We pick it up. That's an instinctive thing.
Yeah, because we're used to it, because you got lived experience in it, It's been happening our whole lives. And I think happened to me, like, excuse me, people used to stare at me because I was in a wheelchair. Now they might know who you are. My favourite is the difference between people coming up on the street knowing who I am and then the people, different reactions when they walk out of a disabled bathroom and see me. That's my favourite these days when they go, oh, I'm in trouble here. I've really stuffed that up, which is very good. Yeah. One space that you play in, it's quite interesting when we talk about representation, because we are getting better at representation of disability. Not great, but we are getting better. But one angle which I agree with what you think with dwarfism is apart from, say, Peter Dinklage, as you said, it's very much in the reference of comedy and how
Yes.
that is portrayed towards people with dwarfism. Can you explain about how you feel about that and experiences and what needs to change?
Well, it's very interesting because Peter Dinklage himself, there's a famous quote from him where he states that dwarfism is the one disability that it's perfectly okay to laugh at.
Yeah, it's honestly, I would agree. Honestly, I don't agree with it, but I would say there's way more dwarfism jokes than wheelchair jokes or blind
Yes.
person jokes or whatever. I would agree with
Yes,
you.
like
Yeah.
I'll be honest. You go to a comedy night, right? You've got half a dozen comedians. You can guarantee you'll get at least one dwarf joke.
Yeah, and the use of the M word, which I don't like saying. They love saying that. Yep.
No, I mean that is just that's a no-go.
Yeah, what do we do about that? What do we do about that?
Well, it's quite interesting because my most recent work addresses the use of language and terms. And I find it interesting when people say to me, well, how do I refer to you? I know what they mean when they ask that. And I say, well, how about you use my name?
No, yeah, I say the same. What do you want me to refer to you as? I go, Dylan? Like not anything else? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how about you just use my name? But I do know what they're referring to. They're referring to the language, and there are actually quite subjective individual differences. And again, there are also cultural differences when it comes to language. Like, for example, I have no discomfort with using the word dwarfism or dwarf but if I do have an issue if I am referred to as the dwarf, oh my gosh, then I have an issue.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Excuse me.
I reckon this is my experience. Wheelchair user in a wheelchair, blind or low vision. The one people struggle with the most about what correct term, I would say, is dwarfism, person of short stature. It is one that people don't.
Little person is another one.
So what you
But
identify?
people think that's comfortable to use.
Which you can't use.
Yep.
So
little person is acceptable in many places.
So is it? I don't know that.
America.
Yeah. Is it?
In
It's
America.
American. Yeah.
In America.
I think there's a TV show called Little People.
It is. Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
So
and again in England, it varies. It varies.
Because there might be there are people who are uncomfortable with the term dwarf.
Yes, there are plenty. And
which is why we
needs to
should
be
use
respected.
first names. That's the easiest way to break it down.
or the best way to find out is ask Debra or ask me.
Yes, ask.
Not like how do I refer to you? Like, hey, look, I just want to make sure you're comfortable. Like, if I'm referring to disability, what's the best way? And you'd be like, I love dwarfism. You're like, cool.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, end of conversation. Let's go get a bloody white wine together or whatever. You know?
There's this TikTok generation, right? I see this more rather than Instagram or Snapchat of the days of beyond. I think there's this, I can't go on my Instagram, which is just basically filled with TikTok content being repurposed, without seeing someone walk up to someone going, hey, what do you do for a living? Hey, can you show me around your apartment? And it's this idea because when we're out in public these days, you can have your photo taken. And it's legal to use that content.
Yeah.
Like there was a woman who got given a bunch of flowers in a food court a year ago or something in Adelaide, and then she went viral on TikTok because he left her with the flowers, and she's like, I don't want the flowers.
No, who are you,
I don't
bro?
want to be part of your TikTok. But she didn't have a choice in it because it's public. She's in a public domain. So when it comes to the idea that, you know, this TikTok generation is only growing and the content that they think that they're serving for a younger audience is going to potentially include people making fun of people with dwarfism in the street. Have you come across that? Are you scared of that content being filled?
Yes. Like, for example, I'll mention the place, Western Sydney Parklands, right? We went there to have a family outing. We had the puppies, myself, my daughter, my husband, right? We got into the car park. We jumped out of the car, and a family were across the car park. They spotted us, got out their phones, their cameras, and started cacking themselves laughing and trying to photograph us. We had just arrived, right? So we weaved through the cars, got in, and we found a spot, and we got, again, people walking past us, pulled out the phone, same thing, right? My daughter and I went for a walk, and we were walking up over like this slightly garden bridge, and there was a man there. He was so obviously taking off, and my daughter just confronted him. Now, at this time, she would have been, this would have been 4 years ago. She would have been, 17, 18, something like that. And she confronted him. She said, "Excuse me, you've just taken a photograph of us. We don't like it. You know, it's a real invasion of our privacy. It's not right. It's not and he goes, "Oh, I didn't. And in that process, put his hand down, and there we were on the screen. And, you know, my daughter goes, "Yes, you did. There, oh. So, and she said, "I want you to delete that now, thank you," which he did. Anyway, we walked on, turned around, and, you know, he didn't turn around, thank heavens. But we got back to where we were. My daughter was in tears, and she said, "I just want to go home. I can't take any more. I just want to go home."
How is your daughter? How is your daughter with a disability?
Oh, fine. But it's like everybody. Dylan, we have our good days, we have our bad days. We hadn't even been there 2 hours. And, you know, just sort of, all we wanted to do was just go out, enjoy a lovely park area, and just have some family time.
Can I ask a question then? Having that lived experience of 60 years with dwarfism, you've probably learned how to disarm people in a way in public, you know, when they come across you and don't know how to react because, you know, there's no education or, you know, platforms or people in the media to allow them to understand fully how to best address you, which should be Debra. What's the best advice that you've given your daughter as somebody with the lived experience?
Well, it's interesting you should say that because, again, going back to when I was expecting my daughter, and I found out she did have dwarfism, and I thought, well, for me, this means I need to be mindful of being a model to her about how to manage, how to cope. And for me, it'd be interesting to get Dylan's perspective here. To me, I have the attitude and philosophy that the most important thing for everybody, it doesn't matter who they are, is respect. I wish to be treated with respect, and I'd like to endeavour, I may not always succeed, but I endeavour to treat everyone else with respect. Let's say, for example, I have never given the middle finger to anybody. Never. No matter how badly they've treated me, I've never given the middle finger.
I've done it out of fun, not out of actual hate. Like,
maybe out of fun, you know. And that's usually a family member.
Right. I do it to Angus, but I love him. Right?
You're scratching your nose with your middle finger before, and I thought you were flipping me the bird.
Oh, yeah. But I'm referring in a response to and modelling reactions.
Yeah, that could be a reaction that you could give in that moment.
I think I haven't seen you and your daughter together, but there's that power in that authenticity as well. And you are authentically you and your disability, which your daughter would see. And that means she can be her authentic self.
But
when she gets
by the same token, I would not. I was very proud of my daughter when she stood up to that gentleman and said, because I thought, yes, she can do this, because she was respectful in the way she said it. And but she was saying, you don't behave like this towards me. I deserve better. And I was very proud of her for that. And so to me, you do have to put boundaries, and you do have to say, no, that is unacceptable. You do not treat me like that.
Before we get into our ball of uncomfortable question, I do have one more.
I'll go one more first.
Okay, go.
Is it in the same vein, or
for it.
I'm going to go rogue? All right, you're at home with your daughter. Something's in a high up cupboard. Smoke alarm goes off. What's the plan? How do you what do you do? Practically, what's going on? Talk me through it.
Well, I can tell you now, and this is in all seriousness, Dylan, that nothing of any importance is beyond our reach.
Love it. Can I give an example of that as well? Please tell me this happens to you. People come to my house and they go, can I have a glass of water? And without fail, they look in the top cupboards and they're all empty. And they go, where's your cups? And I go, not there. It happens.
Exactly.
You've been guilty of it?
Yeah,
everyone. Does it happen to you as well?
Yes.
Oh, I love that.
Yes.
Because your husband is able-bodied, or of average height, is your kitchen modified, or do you have like a step up to it, or how?
I have a step. We have steps. Yeah, we have steps. The only thing that we have modified significantly is the clothesline. Yeah, yeah. Oh, and the cars, of course, the car.
When you drive with your feet still, not hand controls, is that right? With extendo pedals kind of thing? Yeah. It's cool.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I've just got this new wardrobe, which my new housemate Alex put up, legend, and they got hook handles, and you pull them down. So you can use the bottom level and the top level. Does that make sense?
Oh, so you can.
Yeah, I saw them in a
everything.
hotel, so you get double the wardrobe space. Look at accessibility.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, you got to get some. I'll send you the link off air. All right?
Please, please. That's brilliant.
Before we get to the ball of uncomfortable, I have just a question. I mean, there's a really quick one, which is, do you see your height as your unique characteristic about your physical aesthetic? Just in the way that you might distinguish, like when this Zoom started, we're doing this virtually, you know who Dylan is. He's the guy with the beard. We've got, as much as we are, quite similar in looking, you can still distinguish him. I've got some tattoos down my arm.
I mean, you can say I'm in a wheelchair. That also
Oh, yeah,
distinguishes
but you
me.
can't see that on Zoom.
Oh, on Zoom. I thought you meant like in general life.
But
I was
that's
like,
how you distinguish.
Yeah, well, that's like
is that
me.
Dylan
You
with the beard? I
can't,
reckon-
can't see on 4'1".
I was about to say the wheelchair gives it away more than the beard, I reckon.
But is that your unique body perspective for you? Is that your way of being identified? Are you happy with that being the way that people go, oh, there's Debra down the street?
It has its advantages and disadvantages. Like, it's the sort of thing of, yes, I do stand out, and that has positives. I mean, so people do quite readily recognise me. And so I get known around the neighbourhood very quickly. And that is a positive thing. What it means is that I have a significant less degree of privacy, and that's a negative. Like, I wouldn't be able to do anything illegal too readily.
Yeah, that would be a pretty quick
I'd
Crime
get picked
Stoppers.
out in a lineup, wouldn't I?
She's 4'11".
But I fully appreciate people aren't going, oh, there's Dylan, he's got green eyes. It's Dylan in the wheelchair. That's okay, right? And that's fine. And people could go, oh, sorry, I noticed your chair. And then they feel bad. They said that. And then they try and backtrack. And I'm like, it's cool. Because it's a part of my identity. But not everybody,
it is.
Not everyone uses disability identity as a positive thing with disability. So it's all
I guess that's what I was just getting at.
Yeah.
All right.
It is absolutely a part of my identity. And I've not known anything different. So, yeah.
We've got well, now, first and foremost, thank you for your time, Deborah. You're bloody killing it. We've got last couple of questions called the Bowl of Uncomfortable, where people send in questions they feel uncomfortable in, and you have to give an answer. I'll go first because on the same kind of topic.
Yeah.
I have a 4-year-old daughter who's extremely curious, and she saw an older man with dwarfism the other day and screamed out, "Mum, what happened to him?" I felt horrible. I didn't know what to do, so we ran away as quickly as I could. What is the best way to approach this? And do you have any tips on educating my child when it comes to your specific disability or disability as a whole?
Okay, I have a story, and this comes from, it has to do, I wrote a chapter for a book about We've Got This, and it's about parenting.
Eliza Hull's
book.
Eliza.
Which is in my house.
Yes.
And also wrote the incredible jingle that you hear at the start of our podcast.
Yeah, the Listenable theme song
She
is
wrote
written
the
by
theme
Eliza
song.
Hull.
There you go. Well, I know Eliza well. She's excellent. She's great, good value. And I did a chapter for We've Got This book, and it's about 2 instances. One where I was in a bank in Parramatta, and I was in the lineup, and this parent came in with a young child, and of course he was absolutely gobsmacked. And he goes, "Mum, there's a little lady," which is quite common term that they say, "There's a little lady." And he goes, "Why is she so little?" Well, I don't know what was the issue for this parent. She may have had a bad day, but she tore loose, and she said, "Well, I will tell you why she's so small. She's so small because she didn't eat her dinner. So if you don't eat your dinner, you're going to grow up to look like that." Wow. That's not the way to do it.
Did she give you like a smirk like she was being a smartass, or was she being legit?
No. She just cut. Yeah, no.
That's bizarre.
No. So I turned around. That's crossing a line. And so I said, "Excuse me, I'm sorry, but I have done nothing wrong." And I addressed the little boy. I said, "Darling, I was born like this. I have dwarfism. And just to let you know, I always ate my dinner."
Yeah, nice. I love
Especially the Brussels
The
sprouts.
2 things that get me out of that story: 1, the mum's reaction, but 2, that people actually come like, "It's a little lady." Like it's just, I get that. I used to get like, "Oh, it's a wheelie boy over here." I was like, "A wheelie boy? Like, what does that even mean?" People actually use, and they think they're being like polite almost, and it's like it's just an interesting reaction.
Well, children do tend towards that terminology, but not adults. And then we had another situation, and this was again with my daughter, and we were on the Central Coast, and we had our 2 puppies, and I needed to go to the toilet, and so we found the public toilet, and my daughter stayed outside with the puppies, and I went inside. Anyway, unbeknownst to me, this little guy and this young child with his mum walked past, recognised, saw Sarah and went, "Whoa, she's different," and had a reaction, and then came around. They were going to the toilet as well. He was less than 5, and I was leaving the toilet as they were coming in, and it had like this walkway from the outside entrance to the actual cubicles. And I'm walking down the walkway, and he stops dead, and his little mouth drops, and he goes, "Mum, why are there so many of them?"
That's good stuff. That is such good stuff. I would have loved to be there. Kids are amazing. They're amazing. And good on them. Good on the kids.
The mum, you could see she just wanted to dig a hole and throw herself in. And I just walked past, and I walked out, and I saw Sarah, and I told her what happened. She said, "Oh, yes," he reacted. We were cacking ourselves laughing. Anyway, in that time, the mum walked out with the little boy, and she came over and she said, "Oh, look, I really want to apologise for my son. I hope he didn't offend you. He's never seen people so small before." And he asked me, why were they? And I told him that basically we're all different. Some people are big, some people are small, but despite the differences, we're all the same.
Well said.
Yeah.
Don't stop.
Said, that's perfect. And by that time, she brought him over, introduced him to us. And by that time, he was more interested in the puppies than he was in us. So he didn't care.
Don't stop the kids' curiosity is the lesson.
That's right.
Just as long as you do it in a tactful way. Yeah. Good job.
Yeah. So that was the perfect way of addressing it.
And our last question is actually from me. It's this is uncomfortable for me to say because it was a genuinely something that crossed my mind and I felt guilty about it. So this was a story from January. There was a story of a 23-year-old woman. Her name is Shauna Ray Lessick. She has a disability that has her, and I'm using her quotes, I'm inverted commas, living in the body of an 8-year-old. So after her story came out where she spoke about her disability and how people had treated her in public and she's at an age where she can drink out, but she'll obviously get asked or people will say, stop drinking. Why is there an 8-year-old here drinking? Or she was kind of telling her life story, which in itself was interesting. But in the weeks since that article came out, she had found, a connection.
How old was she now?
She's 23 years old.
Yeah.
And a 26-year-old guy called Dan slid into her DMs and they're now essentially dating. Now, my first thoughts when I read this was not initially how great that she found connection. Everybody deserves love and happiness. That's fantastic, regardless of any disability. Everybody deserves to find love. That was my first thought. My first thought was that it was strange for a 26-year-old man to find an 8-year-old female or looking physically, aesthetically attractive. And I don't know if that stems from me being the father of a young daughter. I don't know if that kind of has some sort of bias on it. But regardless of that, I kind of felt a bit uncomfortable with my own feelings. That's how 116 centimetre, 26 or 22 kilogram woman, 23-year-old, that a guy found that attractive. Can you tell me why I'm wrong? And hopefully because I know that a lot of comments underneath were very similar.
Well, Angus, can I just say, the first thing that strikes me about what you've just said is your incredible honesty.
Yeah, and vulnerability there, Gus.
Yeah.
There wasn't a nice feeling. It was the first thing that came to my head was, God, how creepy. That was sort of the thing, that a guy could find an 8-year-old woman's, and even though she's a 23-year-old woman, her physical, it sits uncomfortably with me.
You wount've checked yourself without your knowledge now about disability. That just goes ongoing for people.
And I know obviously with, dwarfism, you would have had infantilization for most of your life and therefore also sort of, I don't know whether you could kind of speak to it because I know it's wrong and I'd like to learn about why it's wrong.
Well, the first thing that I think is, as I said, first of all, I just want to commend you on your honesty there and reflection, Angus, because it's being able to reflect in that manner. That means that people are willing to engage with their own attitudes and consider and then shift. And that's what's needed. But as regards the situation that you're talking about, my first assumption is that when they met, the discussions that they had, the conversations that they had, he saw her. He didn't see the physical difference. He engaged with the person. And that's what he found attractive, the person. Yeah, which is that the personality, the attitudes, the beliefs, and, that isn't, she hasn't necessarily, just gotten on, met him and he's, wanted to jump on her straight away. That attraction can grow.
I think you nailed it because we're so ingrained in society that physical appearance is such a big part of any relationship, and that's where and for parts it is for sure, but for a lot of people that have accidents, skin injuries, dwarfism, wheelchairs, you already got a partner, you'd be like, it's all right, you can break up with me now because I'm not attractive anymore. It's like, no, but it's not always about that. So you're right, to check that. My head went there straight away, like, oh, well, it's just a person, but I think because of we see difference in such a different light when it comes to attraction as to every day, which I think would play a role there. Good question, Gus.
Yeah.
Way to not put a fake name
is.
on that. Peter from Brisbane
It's
asks.
a powerful question, and I think, as you said, uncomfortable.
Yeah, definitely. And the comments are more uncomfortable. You know, the comments are more
Brutal,
scathing,
but they're scathing.
very
They're gross.
brutal.
They're gross, the comments, yeah.
Underneath it. But it was and that actually sort of like upset me the most was that I aligned my thought process initially with not in the same, obviously using the same vernacular and the terminology in the comments, but that these people that I don't support the ideas of and probably a lot of their morality, I sort of in this moment had a shared opinion of, and that kind of made me feel a little bit icky. And obviously somebody who, like I said, has probably dealt with that a little bit. I thought it was a proper question to ask to your face.
Now, Debra, before we came on, you said that you prefer Debra, but I'm going to do it. You ready?
Oh, God.
Bloody love you, Deb. That was great.
He said if we were friends.
You said if we were friends, and I feel like we're friends. Are we friends?
Yes.
You
We
legend.
are, mate.
We are.
What a
So,
high,
mate,
like not high level, but like high intellect chat. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that. Thanks for being so raw and honest with us, and congrats on all the incredible work that you do. Psychologist, academic, artist, author. Too many A's there. I think you need to calm down a bit. All right, you're doing too much good stuff.
But thank you so much for the last, however long, and also for anyone who wants to get in contact with you, we're going to chuck the link to your website, your socials, everything below, so they can. Some of the great things about this podcast is we might have a parent of somebody with dwarfism who might get something out of this and want to reach out to you because they've felt a connection through our conversations.
You kind of know when you finish this episode, that one's going to help.
Yeah, I'm like, you're going to get reached out to.
This is going to be a helping one of a
Yeah.
lot of people, and helps a weird word, but definitely support, and we appreciate it.
Yeah.
and I would be happy to do that.
Good on you, Debra.